I'm Jim Collison and live from Omaha, Nebraska in the Gallup offices in Singapore. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, Southeast Asia edition, recorded on May 12th, 2014. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals and teams as well as organizations around the world. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during the show, we do have a live chat room available for you. It's right below the main video window. Or if you're listening to the recorded version, you can email those to us right after the show, coaching@gallup.com. And don't forget to visit our Gallup Strengths Center. Super easy to remember. It's just GallupStrengthsCenter.com, all one word, for your coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video in both streaming or now downloadable audio for offline listening to past shows, and we have quite a few of those now, over at coaching.gallup.com. Sarv Atri is our host today. Sarv works as the Director of Talent Sourcing with Gallup in Singapore. And Sarv, it's great to see you today, and welcome to another Call to Coach.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's, again, good to be back for our Call to Coach Southeast Asia edition. And today, I'm really excited. We have a very senior professional join us today. So, it's my privilege to introduce to you Chandru Pingali. He literally has 28 years of professional experience as a human resources worldwide, literally. And I call him somebody who's been at the corporate side of affairs for a really long time and has been with working on Gallup tools as a coach and has seen success, and we'll talk about today. And just to give you a little bit more introduction on Chandru Pingali, he has received several awards. He's an award-winning HR professional. He's been awarded the Best HR Professional of the Year 2003 by World HRD Congress, Outstanding HR Professional by Decade Herald, and many other HR leadership awards throughout his range of experiences worldwide. Currently, he runs I-Cube Consortium, a consulting organization, and previously he spent literally almost 24 years working with Standard Chartered Bank, as the head of HR for transactional banking and other divisions. So, Chandru, it's a privilege to have you today on our Call to Coach edition. We would love to hear your stories, about your strengths journeys, about the way you've coached senior executives within the bank, and implemented a lot of HR strategies with them. So let's, without wasting any time, let's start off with your stories, your journeys. A lot of coaches are dialed in live to hear, what you have to say today. So, if you could kick off things with, your top 5, that would be fantastic.
Okay, thank you for having me, Saurabh and Jim. Yes, it's been a privilege to be here as well, and hope to share some of my experiences within the bank. I've been practicing Gallup philosophy for the last 12 years. Let me first start with the top 5, and then I'll share with you about how I got into it in the first place. My top 5 are ideation as number 1, arranger is number 2, focus is number 3, achiever is number 4, and relator is 5. For what it's worth, now that we look at top 10 as the integral part of the philosophy for the practice, responsibility, futuristic, discipline, strategic, and learner are my next 5. Entry into Gallup philosophy. Actually, we, as a bank, we introduced Gallup philosophy in 2001 when we had a global director of HR who joined, who worked very closely with the founders of Gallup, and he felt that we should really leverage the strengths-based philosophy for Standard Chartered Bank, which is a global organization, large presence in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, with the US and UK as the bridge to these markets. So we started with Q12 engagement as the primary tool of measuring employee engagement, and then went on to introduce Strengths Finder philosophy. The whole approach has been that we decided that HR relationship managers across 35 countries need to be trained as coaches in the Gallup's strengths-based approach. And then each one of those HR relationship managers in turn will be able to partner with the business, with the other support functions in maximizing the usage of strengths philosophy and ensure that they play to the strengths and therefore maximize performance and outcomes. So with that framework in mind, at some point in time, we had about almost 100 coaches within the bank. And then we started building strengths philosophy through all other interventions. Let me give you a few examples. We started with individual coaching. Then we started with team coaching, where, for example, I must have held tens of team coaching sessions where we had specific goals in mind, and then we worked backwards from the goals that the teams want to achieve, and how they can achieve, with each one of them playing the role of the interdependent collaborator in getting the right outcomes, desired outcomes for their function. Then we decided that we could even leverage this philosophy even more. So we built our leadership development framework with Gallup philosophy. So, for example, we had 20 competencies to measure how a leader ought to be in the company and what could make a great leader, leveraging these 20 competencies. And so we decided we will use the leadership development framework tailored for Standard Chartered by Gallup in starting from assessment to development. In my experience, it's not enough to use it one way or other. It is an integrated philosophy that need to be leveraged for building a strengths-based organization. So at the assessment stage, I was probably involved in scores of recruiting CEOs and very senior business leaders using this leadership development framework. And we then understand what kind of leaders they are. It was not a screening mechanism, please. It is more of an aid towards identifying the right kind of leader and how he could play to the strengths for the role which we're recruiting. And so that's the second piece of work which you did. The third one we realized which we could do better is in developing tailor-made, again, selection tools for different roles, particularly the roles which are common across the bank in 40-50 countries. Example, relationship managers for client coverage. We then enlisted Gallup to do this for us in developing a tailor-made selection tool for recruiting the best relationship managers. Likewise, best HR relationship managers, etc. And I could go on. So we used the philosophy for selection. Then we moved to the next phase of actually measuring the performance of these people who are recruited through the selection tools developed through strengths philosophy, and started tracking them over a year or 2 years to see what difference has it made in terms of predictability and consistency in pre-selection tool, which had different assessment techniques to what we use for Gallup as well. So we then realized that the approach to strengths-based philosophy could be really powerful if we start recognizing, realizing, acknowledging, and leveraging how we can use this across different organizations. Let me bring this to life with a couple of examples. One is the relationship manager for client coverage. Now, how did we go about creating it? It's one thing to say we have done a great job, or we're getting there. It's another thing to sort of understand the how, which I'm sure many of the people who are in the corporate world who may be listening into or who would want to play this later, or the coaches might really want to understand the practical creative ideas to solution building. Now, we had relationship managers across different markets who are calling on the clients. So we identified the top 100 relationship managers across 10 to 12 countries who are producing excellent performance year on year consistently over a couple of years. Then we also had to choose those who are not so good as relationship managers as well, maybe because those roles do not play to their strengths and they needed to do something else. For whatever reasons, we have always those different strata of performances in different roles. So we took the best as well as the not so best, and then we understood what is it that they bring to the table in terms of their talents, which they have now converted into strengths. And then we went on to identify the raw talent themes that seem to be producing the best relationship managers. And then that was need to be again validated. So we went back to the population within the bank. We validated the tool for its validity and reliability as a selection tool. And then we kind of placed it online, and we started looking at recruiting people. So we leveraged that, where every time we wanted to recruit a relationship manager, we said it's mandatory for them to go through this this selection tool. Frankly, we established then thresholds like you establish with any other selection tool for different cultural and ethnic origins because of their language issues. And then we use that as an aid. It's not a screening process, by the way, and it's not a shortlisting process. I keep repeating that. It's an aid towards the selection of the right kind of people for the right kind of roles. And that then went on to expand itself to international graduates, which again is even today very popular. Even today it's being used, even after I was deeply involved in that. We introduced about 6-7 years ago. Again, the best international graduate trainees, and the process has been the same. And then what do they bring to the table, and how do we select the best guys to come and join Standard Chartered? It has elements of not just the skill sets or the knowledge, but the talents that will be more successful in Standard Chartered. That was key. It also has cultural orientation behind it. Okay, let me pause there. So that's the intensity with which we have started working in Standard Chartered Bank, and my involvement has been in each of these interventions. And because I'm so passionate about leveraging strengths, I suppose I just have to hold myself back for the next question.
Great. That was wonderful. I love the stories that you shared there. Also from, you mentioned that you led a lot of team sessions and also a lot of interventions yourself. Now, if you could share some stories of those, or where did you see the most effective conversations happen with your managers, with the people that you coached, and you saw results, it translated to results over time? We'd love to hear about that.
Okay, so let me take a couple of examples. Again, it's different markets, different countries, and that's the beauty of this philosophy, frankly. I've had the privilege to work in UK, US, Australia, Africa, Singapore, India. So I have, and then traveled so many more countries. So it's been a real honor for me to have worked across all the continents in the world and practice elements of this philosophy. This philosophy goes so deep that it will be arrogant of me to say that there has been an extensive usage and I'm a master of it all. Every day I learn using this philosophy, and I still think that there is so much more to go. Let me give you 2-3 examples. This is an example of Africa. Now, I went there as a director HR for East Africa. I realized at that time it was just the beginning when we started using the strengths philosophy. It was in 2001. Honestly, I was learning about the philosophy. I was certified as a coach. I didn't know anything about coaching. Or I didn't know much about the philosophy itself. But I knew heart of heart inherently strengths-based approach is the right thing to do. So we had a management team which constituted a Britisher, an American, a Frenchman, an Indian, and a couple of Africans. So a very nice, well-diverse group of people. And we realized that we have a huge opportunity to build a culture in Africa. The culture in Africa predominantly is more about what can I get than what can I give, naturally so, because it's scarce, resource scarce region. And so how do we kind of ensure that the people who are working in the bank are highly engaged, energized and enabled in playing to their strengths. So engage and energize, I had different interventions, all right, but enable is where we started focusing on using strengths philosophy. So, you know, when I realized that I had a team, a fairly large team of African people, I needed to be very specific in the way I can place them in different roles which will play to their strengths, and then we maximize performance as a team. Now, HR in Kenya, in East Africa, when I went in, it was a greenfield setup for me because it had perhaps the lowest possible ratings, and so I only had an opportunity to sort of take it up. So, I recruited a few people, understanding the strengths. So what I did was to have a team session where I used strengths of different team members and started looking at the various themes, whether it is execution, influencing, relationship, or strategic. And we realized that as a team, we were a lot more in the execution as well as in relationships, and a lot less on influencing and strategic. Some of us were there in each of those buckets, all right, but we really needed to have something more. So I went ahead and recruited, and I actually asked the person to whom we were recruiting to do the Strengths Finder. And we did the Strengths Finder before recruitment, again as an aided tool. And then we realized that there are a couple of senior guys who were bringing in the influencing and strategic themes, which was perfect for us. The interdependency and the collaboration which we required to take the value addition of HR effectiveness from where they were to sort of couple of notches higher across Africa was absolutely something which was on my agenda. And that then, once we had a team which was able to play to their strengths, I had people who are execution focused in operations. I had people who are relationship driven and strategic as relationship managers. I had people who were influencing and relationship in the area of product, HR products. So I kind of ensured that there was a fairly wide distribution of people based on their strengths, and that took off the HR function in the way we added value to the business to a different level. So much so that we were rated as among the top 3 HR teams in the world in Standard Chartered at some point in time. So that's one story. Let me shift focus to the business. It is more, this is about a business proposition that we did when I went back to India as head of HR. We acquired Grindlace, and then there was a huge agenda on the table for us as a top team. I was again a member of the management committee which runs the bank in the region, and then we realized that we had a set of team members, and then I started coaching each one of them individually, the top team members, and then made them realize that this is what they bring as strengths to the table, and this is how they can liberate their strengths. Just let me give you one example of the CEO of the bank, who is now actually CEO, group director of the bank globally. He is one guy who has woo as number 1 and relator as number 5. Very rare combination to find woo and relator, and then there is focus, and then there is achiever. So he was one guy who could be all over the place in South Asia. He is one guy who could inspire, motivate, energize people. It was coming very naturally to him, but when we had that conversation and I pointed out saying, you are amazing as a people person who could inspire people. All you need to do is please go and we will organize for you town halls across 15 markets within India, Nepal, and other places. You got to energize them and mention to them the kind of the results you expect. We are with you. And then when he speaks, he energizes, he inspires. It was pure magic. And then on top of it, he has also got related, and therefore what tends to happen is he then waits in the evening and starts building deeper relationship with some of them, as many as he can. And therefore it's not just about inspiring and meeting people and then moving to the next lot of people, but it's also about deepening relationships with some of them, and that enabled him to be a kind of an informal coach for many of those leaders across the region. at least 40–50% of the bank even now thinks that he's their mentor. And then the final one is the focus. So it was all right to inspire, but what was critical was he had those goals in mind, and he was able to connect those goals and then bring it to life. I still remember one story where he leveraged this very successfully. We realized that we were making X million dollars as a bank in India. We acquired Greenlace, heavy, expensive, and we needed to ensure that we move the revenue up by 54 million, and this was in June of that year. And we actually had to ensure that we produce for the next 6 months $54 million. And this guy comes to the table, and we had a conversation around it. And then he said, look, we need to position. So what are the couple of things I could say? And we discussed that, and we went in, and he went and then addressed the large gathering. And he said, guys, we make $1 million of bad debt or book a bad debt per week because we are a large book. So skip a few weeks, guys, and then you start making that money, and then add a few weeks in the way you can create $1 million revenues per week, and then start traveling in economy class. And then I think before you know, you'll start making those $54 million, and you will start finding me traveling economy class. And then some of you who travel extensively will probably find me as a partner in your next seat. And lo and behold, I mean, that inspired the team so much that lo and behold, within 6 months, we actually exceeded the budget, and we made slightly more than what was expected of the India region. But the example there is about how he recognized, he leveraged woo and focus as two themes in inspiring people to towards the end goal. Okay, so that's the second story, and I could go on. There are so many stories one could share about how the team coaching as well as individual coaching can leverage organizational success towards maximizing performance. If you want to learn a few more stories of the current and relevant ones, I could go on. So over to you, though, Saurabh.
Well, absolutely. We just want you to carry on. You are just in such a beautiful flow that I want you to take the center stage here. Tell us a little bit more stories, of some of the aha moments that you've personally had in some of these coaching conversations, or you saw other people have those aha moments.
Right. Okay. So let me start with myself in terms of application. When I saw my top 5 and the next 5. Okay, first of all, I identified with all of them. I'm the kind of guy, I realized, who could get 10 ideas a week with ideation as #1 strength. And then thank God I have focus and achiever helping me in ensuring that I anchor my ideas towards the desired outcomes. And when I realized that this is what I do as a pattern, when I realized that these are my talent themes which I could then convert to strengths, that then helped me to start looking at whether it is HR functions or business interventions or building individuals and what have you. Each one of those areas, I started looking at how I could leverage my strengths. And then one thing I do is to use Strengths Finder as a tool everywhere I go. My teams, if they have not done their Strengths Finder in any new country or a region I go to, the first thing I do is ask them to do the Strengths Finder. If I have a team, a subsidiary of the bank, Scope International, based in Chennai, Malaysia, and China, we had large setup there, and the team was not exposed to Strengths Finder as much as I would like, and I had very large team there. First thing I did was, guys, go ahead and do Strengths Finder. I'd like to have team sessions to understand what strengths do you bring to the table and how we can leverage them towards maximizing performance of this subsidiary of the bank. So just to bring it to life, one story of this guy who was in Scope International, he very erudite person, and then I met him on one of those forums where I was addressing a large gathering of university students, a huge gathering actually of 1,000, 1,500 students there. And then he was on the podium, and he was not part of the bank yet. And I did say to him, okay, why don't you take StrengthsFinder, and then we'll have another conversation about how I can explore you to join the bank. And then he went on to do StrengthsFinder, and then I realized that some of the strengths he brings to the table is something which I needed at that point in time to build the organization to the next level, particularly in the learning and development space. So I asked him to come on board, actually head up HR relationship for a particular business for about a year. And then during the year, I started having conversations, and I realized that, look, he had developer in the top 5, okay, and he had individualization. Now, for an organization which is about 10,000 people, ramping up from 2,500 in a short span of 3 years, I thought this is very powerful for us, which is required. It enables us to attract talent in the right manner. It enables us to develop them. And so how do I do this? So when I took him as a relationship manager, I knew that eventually I'm going to sort of move him to my head of chief learning officer for the whole organization, learning and talent development, which within a year he moved there, and he did such a great job. He in fact was one person whom I relied on for all HR recruitment. If I want to recruit HR relationship manager as I expand, the first guy to interview is this guy, because he has individualization and he identifies those unique talents of each individual and skill set. So he brings to the table those things, and then I invest time between the two of them. We built the HR function starting from 12 people and pushing up to almost 48 HR professionals across the organization, and every one of them playing to their strengths. You know, the magical thing about how we have small team meetings, and each one of them actually having right kind of objectives. Again, let me give an example. Somebody who's focused and achiever, I kind of mentioned to them saying, okay, now you go and help the business understand his goals, her goals, and see how you can help that business maximize their performance, and they go like a bull in a china shop. Focus and achiever, I do have them as well, and then they go like a bull in a china shop, and I just have to hold them back at times so that they are not being insensitive to people, and that could be a downside or the edge in the power they bring to the table. And then there are others who are individualization as the top 5. They are my head of resourcing. I mean, they can recruit the kind of people they recruit, will bring in the real kind of talent to the bank. So, and I can go on. So the whole organization was built around understanding the strengths and how each one could be leveraged in different roles to bring that performance to the table. I know that Gallup does not practice the philosophy saying, okay, any strengths are powerful enough for any role, is what Gallup prescribes. And many times I used to ask some of the Gallup experts like Andrew Green, with whom I work very closely, and say, hey, can you not identify some of the roles to competencies to the people? And he said, no, we don't do that work, and we probably do some of that, but I think we leave it to the practitioners to discover that a lot more. And I took that as a challenge, and therefore there are so many more roles we started identifying using strengths philosophy. For example, some of the CEOs of the bank, we realized that the role of the CEOs is to inspire people, to motivate people, to inspire the people in that community, the other stakeholders like regulators and what have you. For us to have woo in the top 5 of these CEOs, because they're not accountable for revenue. They're not. Business is accountable for revenue. CEOs is to ensure that they charge that place up, they energize it, they ensure that they can kind of bring the right kind of gravitas to the table for us. And so we started looking at CEOs, and we realized that CEOs with woos are actually being a lot more successful than those who do not. On the business side, people who are heading up the large businesses, we recognize that some of the business heads are those who got focus, achiever, developer, are people who become very powerful leaders. And here is one story that I bring it to life. I have a global business head in the bank. He's still he's deputy CEO of the bank, by the way. And his number one strength is context. Now, I was helping him recruit a lot of CEOs and business leaders in the bank, actually more of business leaders than CEOs. And we were ramping up the business. And every time I have to recruit a business head, I used to go through this process of the leadership development framework, which is built by Gallup. That's a starting point. Then I interview the guy. Then I have a few people interview. And then we put up a note to him to seeking from him the approval to hire this guy. Now, every time I have to go to this guy, I need to be sure that I'm presenting that paper with a kind of write-up which appeals to him and give him a background, because every hire for us is up to $2 million, $3 million. You know how it is in banking industry. It could be really expensive to hire these guys and make them successful. So for this CEO or deputy CEO, number one strength is context. Now I realize that, okay, for him, what requires is a paper which starts with the context or a background about what we are recruiting for, why we want to recruit this person, and what we think that this person will bring to the table in building the business to the next level, whether it is a startup business within the new product range or expanding the business in a different geography. So I write a one-pager of context, and then I flow to who has interviewed him and what are the numbers to recruit, etc. Because these are big numbers to be approved. I tell you, I mean, it's such a pleasure to actually recollect that there isn't a single time he rejected a paper for hiring that person, not once. And I related back, I connected back to the fact that he had context as number one theme. He was not interested in knowing how the business is built futuristically from $100 million to $500 million. All of that is fine. But to say to him that, look, this is where we started and this is how we want to look at this business and this is where we believe we would want to go and this is how it adheres to his own vision of business building, we just got 100% approvals every single time. So for some of the people who want to practice in a corporate world, whether it is individual coaching or team coaching, or looking at how you can connect and relate to the business heads, I think it's so important for you to understand their drivers, how they come across, how they think, how they get up in the morning to have their pattern established, and therefore what is it that you could do to connect with them and therefore able to provide that intervention. The last guy whom I connected with is a global business head for client coverage, and he's an American. His top 5 strengths focused around he's a developer, all right, but he's got focus, he's got woo, and if I remember right, he's got individualization. So for him, what is important? Yes, of course, in the top 5 he had strategic as well. What was important for him was that it is not just about driving the business like a bull in a china shop. What he wanted was investment in people. And he said, if we invest in our people and if we get the right people in through the door, I think they will maximize the performance for us. So Chandru, I need you to identify the top 40 countries where we have the business and the right kind of market share that we have, and then look at the strengths of those people and who they are, and if we have to replace some of them, and we have to do that ruthlessly, mind you, and find them some other roles, but we need to find people who could maximize and take the business to the next level. Now, a business leader speaking that language is music to my ears. Most of the time, it's HR guys who have to go and talk to them saying, now, hang on a minute. You can't measure that guy only by the revenue he's generating, but also look at the kind of leadership he's providing, kind of look at how he's building succession, how he's building talent bench strength. This is a hard sell for me with every CEO, every business head to start looking at. Now here is a guy who comes forward and says, no, I want you to build a scorecard where revenue is 50% of the measurement, Chandru. And he gave me a challenge. He said, in the next 6 months, I would like you to build a scorecard for measuring the top 100 managing directors of my business, for measuring how they build succession and leadership, not just about revenue generation. And in addition to that, I also want to measure how they mitigated or managed risk of their portfolio. Music to my ears. It was a big challenge for me to build a scorecard on an iPad, which was just started 4 years ago. But it was a challenge nevertheless, which we worked on. And for the first time, we created a scorecard for the managing directors where we measured all the 4 or 5 parameters thanks to this guy, and that became a best practice. So much so that the CEO of the bank globally, as well as the global head of HR, said, hey, how can we leverage this for all the managing directors and the senior leaders of the bank in the way this scorecard could measure? Because we've always had the businesses focus on revenue, focus on bad debts avoided, or focus on audit success or failure. But here is one where we started looking at how many new people he brought to the table, what kind of investment he made to the succession bench, how many people he appointed based on succession planning and not just recruitment, what kind of talent has he identified and what kind of investment did he make in the talent, how much of promotion of the talent he took place. Music to the ears of people who want to multiply leadership capability in the bank. And this guy played beautifully.
Chandru, quick question. What's the conversation that you had that made him a believer, or maybe some tips, techniques that you use to kind of, transform them towards understanding that how does people play into a big part into businesses as well today?
See, there are 2 ways of looking at it, Saurav. One is to coach the leader, okay? One is to coach the leader and say, hey, like we have done for that South Asia region where I highlighted to him that, look, you have woo and your focus. By God, we need to just organize town halls and, and you can inspire people, and the rest of the work, we will do it for you, kind of. On the other hand, it's so important, I learned, that we as coaches, we as practitioners of strengths philosophy, identify the leader's strengths and understand what drives them, what ticks them, what is it that they do naturally, and therefore how do we approach them and connect with them so that they are able to then listen to us. See, the influencing mechanism, I don't have a single team in the top 10 in influencing bucket. By the way, I really don't strongly believe that we need to bucket strengths into any one of those four streams. I believe that yes, we need to identify the areas where we are not so strong in any of those buckets, but we could use other strengths to sort of cover that, either be creating teams or perhaps look at our own strengths to leverage them. So I realized that to influence these leaders, the best thing to do is to understand how they behave, how they come up naturally in the way they drive their portfolio or performance. Once I understand that, then it becomes easier for us to start influencing them through their strengths, not my strengths alone, through their strengths. Once those strengths are understood, and then he realizes, hey, he's talking my language, he's talking what I appreciate, and therefore he immediately connects. Once the chemistry is created, then it's easier to get breakthroughs. Then he start listening to you. You then become his trusted lieutenant, and then once that happens, and then you show execution of some of the things we agree with the guy. One of the things I learned working with these global business leaders is it's good to just, it's good to sort of influence them to come out with ideas, but it is so important to show execution. Fortunately, my teams are very strong in execution, so I ensure that if I agree with him 3 out of 5, I show execution in a very short span and speed of turnaround. And once he starts seeing execution from the conversations that have happened, as well as also aligned to his own thought process, then he's listening to doing things a lot more. And then you are able to access. Let me give you a live example. Here is again, he's a global director of the bank today, but when I started working with him, he was a global business head. Who, again, you can see that it's who is a CEO, and then he's got focus, he's got achiever, he's got individualization, very interesting themes. So what I realized was that when I started relating and connecting with him, one of the things which I mentioned to him once I have shown him some execution, I said, why do you have a strategic people agenda? You have a global business, you have a strategic people agenda, which it gives you a perspective for the next 3 years. What is it that you need to do from a people perspective to align to your business growth? You set up a very ambitious target to grow from 4 billion to 7 billion. Brilliant. But what are you doing about it? He said, Chandru, that's an excellent idea. So what do you recommend? So I said, I would work on a strategic people agenda for the top 12 markets in the world. And here is the template of what we need to look at, and this will be what we need for the client coverage globally, and these are the top 12 markets we need to focus on. He said, fantastic, what do you want? I said, I need $200,000. He said, don't even ask, just go, do, spend, and then how long do you need? I said, I need a couple of people, and I need 2 months to sort of deep dive into it. Go for it. And I tell you, that whole it kind of became a strategic initiative for him, and then I started including him, and then I had 2-member team. It took us 2 months to deep dive into these 12 markets, as well as also take the diagnostics from these 12 markets to derive at the key findings for the whole business globally. And then he said, this is phenomenal. I want you to spend time to present this in the global top team meetings. I want to give you half a day for this. We had only 2 days of meeting every quarter. He said, I want you to take half a day. And we went into the detail and we took strategic decisions on that. And then every one of them started coming through for execution. Of course, execution, a lot of this fell onto me. But then they were there to support each one of those business sites and said, okay, for this, you have my support. Here is $250,000. For this, you have my support. Here is $100,000. So help was coming in all kinds of directions because it was not me who started owning this. It is now the business head who said, here is the HR guy who is actually shown as to what we can do to drive this business through a strategic people agenda, and let's start driving it. This we started in 2009. In 2012, we started measuring through a scorecard, and we probably achieved about 40–50% of it, and there was an agenda to go forward, but we prioritized and executed those. So I don't know if this answers the question, Saurabh, for you or for others on the team, but I know it's not just about the aha moments of your discovering yourself and through individual coaching, but it's also about understanding the leaders and then connecting with them through their strengths, and then it just opens the door very wide for you to influence them.
Beautifully, and I love what you said, understanding the needs of the leaders and targeting those needs through, those strength-based conversations and helping them see, what the end goal could look like. Also, from your perspective, you've been coaching and practicing this philosophy for the past 12 years, and then you decided to do the course as well at our Mumbai office. How was that experience for you? Because you've been an expert, you've been doing this for a while, and then going through the program.
Initially, honestly, my first response was, why would I have to do this all over again? I've been practicing this for 12 years. Do I really need to so-called recertify myself? And I did ask that question, actually to you, if you remember, as much as to those guys who are running this course back in India. So, but when I realized that it's been 12 years and Gallup would have, in its typical style, invested a lot in enabling its coaches, enabling its clients to leverage this philosophy. So I said, okay, I'm going to go there and I learn a lot more than what I have probably learned 10, 12 years ago in a formal session. And frankly, when I went there, it was such a brilliant experience. When we started and when we got coached 12 years ago, frankly, we didn't have enough tools. We learned, we experimented, we made mistakes, you know, and we kind of had an, how do I say, an environment which was less risky, more secure within the bank, so we could sort of connect with relationships and learn to practice, and then we built it from there. But for those who actually want to be independent practitioners, as well as then practice to influence their organizations, what we saw there was such a powerful toolkit. You know, and kind of the theme insights, the pairing booklet, you got different photographs on the booklets to identify, individual coaching toolkit, team coaching toolkit, and then how the design could work for a one-day workshop. Boy, I mean, you guys have done such a fantastic job in bringing it to reality, to very practical approach to practicing this in either organizations within or for coaches. It's been a fantastic experience. Of course, I enjoyed myself thoroughly because for me, when I was you know, learning a lot about the whole philosophy for those 4.5 days, I could bring it to life with several examples during those 4.5 days, and that brought it to life for a lot of those coaches, so much so that, you know, I ended up coaching 6 of them in those 4.5 days because they were learning, and for me it was a practice already existing, and then bring it to life. So it was quite a learning experience, quite insightful in the tools and the techniques that have been built for coaches, see a number of aha moments to reconnect back with my learnings in the corporate shop floor, back to the philosophy, and finally, you know, helping others to learn as well. So those are the 4 takeaways, if you like, when I went back for recertification.
Beautiful. And we do have our next course in Bangalore coming up, you know, from the 9th till the 13th of June, and in Singapore from the 2nd till the 6th of June as well. So if you're interested, you can go on our website, Gallup-Strengthscenter.com, and absolutely, or reach out to us at coaching@gallup.com. Jim, do you have any questions from your end?
Yeah, actually, I've got one, and it's kind of the #1 question we get all the time from the chat room, and it's usually from first-line managers who have taken the Strengths Finder and see the benefit in an organization. You came at this from the top down. They're coming at it from the bottom up. What kind of advice would you give to a frontline manager that might be working in an organization that does not deploy Strengths? What kind of advice would you give them to help push that up?
Mind you, I only gave some examples of top down, but when we started, I did a lot of work with first-line managers because they are the people who produce. I'm not saying leaders don't, but you know, leaders are leading large teams, and then it's mine. So for me, the real target group was first-line managers for discovering their strengths and enabling them to succeed. So a lot of the team sessions I held was at the first-line managers level because they, you know, on a day-to-day basis, we had to ensure that they become better people managers. One of the biggest things that I discovered in the Generation Y kind of population that I have led, and that theme, that hypothesis which is proven, is in today's world, young managers lead younger workforce. So all my first-line managers in the bank, in the scope or subsidiaries, at least 80% of them were below 28, which is Generation Y. Okay. Therefore, how do we enable them to become better people managers? Okay. And therefore, using strengths philosophy. And then we also had Q12 as well. So we could easily kind of integrate, weave the engagement philosophy using Q12, and the strengths philosophy using Strengths Finder to be able to identify those frontline managers who are scoring 4.5 out of 5 in engagement scores, and also having the lowest attrition and maximizing performance. Who are they? And we started looking at them and saying, make heroes out of them. And that, when we started off, is when you could actually push it up. It's not necessary to just start with the leaders, frankly. If you have first-line managers who are starting to use that, let them demonstrate the power of this philosophy through their teams. And then once you start showing the nuggets of performance and excellence in those teams, then people will start noticing. And I always say this: you cannot hide a pumpkin in a plate of rice. You cannot. And those then get noticed, and then leaders start picking up as to what is happening and why is it happening, and you start having that spreading into the organization. And I'm happy to meet some of them and advise. It's not like I have all the answers, but hopefully there will be some ideas which they can pick up from.
Very good. Sorry,
and we'd love to
wrapped up our time here. No, go ahead.
Yeah, just no, we'd love to hear from some of the people, coaches that logged in live or will be seeing this as a recorded version. If you will have any questions for Chandru, feel free to write to us at coaching@gallup.com, and we'll be happy to kind of connect you to Chandru and help you answer some of those questions. Chandru's been a great coach and has been a great leader as well within his organization. Literally an award-winning leader worldwide, sharing some of his best practices, and we are privileged to have him on the show today. So thank you so much, Chandru. For sparing time and coming on to the show and sharing your experiences with people. We learned so much just during this conversation, and we hope we can carry these conversations forward, and maybe we'll call you back again another day on a Call to Coach to continue this conversation. In the interest of time, Jim, over to you for final closure.
You bet. Thanks, Sarv. We'll remind everyone again, take full advantage of all the resources that we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center. Again, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. Sorry, I've already mentioned, but you can send your questions to coaching@gallup.com, and don't forget, we have all the recorded audio and video. You can watch this as many times as you want, and this one was particularly good. I would recommend you rewind and start from the beginning and listen to it one more time. Take a few notes. All those are available over at coaching.gallup.com. We say thanks for joining us today. We look forward to the next Call to Coach. Goodbye, everyone.